Eyes wide open. Step into the shadows. If you think the stories are just myths, think again. Now let's take a look.
Missing.
Oh, we should have never came to the Appalachian Mountains.
Chris! What?
That wasn't me. That came from the woods.
How far to the top? 20 minutes. You said that 20 minutes ago. Who runs this with nothing? That's not the same woman. Kurt, she went past us. We're going back.
Appalachians call mountain lions painters because of the sound they make, like a woman screaming. And if you hear it, you run. The scream freezes you. Your brain can't process it. Sounds human. Sounds close. Sounds wrong. Old folks say if you hear the painter, something's hunting you. Could be the cat. Could be something worse using the sound. Either way, you don't investigate. You go home. You lock the doors. You wait for daylight. People who went looking for the screaming woman never came back the same. Some didn't come back at all. The mountains still have painters, and they still scream.
So I was telling y'all the story about my dad growing up around Tutwiler, and then he grew up in Good Springs, which is, I grew up on that farm in Good Springs too, the one that over there in that area that I'm about to talk about. No, the farm is not what's haunted, but they lived by Martin High School, which is not there anymore. None of this that I'm talking about is there anymore, but anybody that grew up around here remembers all of it. So there was Martin High School, and then there was a church. Just down the road, there was a church, and then there was an old house beside it, like a white house, really close to the church. And the church, like, I don't know about inside the church, but my dad was like, you would see figures from the graveyard and behind the church, like walking behind. You would see figures walking back behind there and up the hillside, but there would be nobody back there, but you would see like black shadows and figures. It was really creepy. And he said also that there was a light on top of the church, like at the porch. There was a light, and it was stationary. It did not swing. He said, but you would be back at a distance and they would see it swinging. You could see the light swinging. Like there wasn't branches around it to be like obstructing the light and stuff and make it look like it was swinging. It would be swinging, and then they would get over there and it would stop. It wouldn't be swinging anymore. But then like the scariest story that I've ever heard about over there was, this happened to my uncle and my aunt. They're not married anymore, but this back when they were. And this is when, I mean, I had to be really, really little, I had to be really little. And I remember this house now. I've been in this house, but I did not know this back then when I was little, but I've been in this house before. And, they were staying in it, and they were watching TV at night, and it was getting later or whatever. It was dark outside, and they kept hearing knocking from the basement door. Like if somebody was in the basement and had come up and was knocking on the door. And my uncle was like, what the? So he goes and he checks, and he goes downstairs. He goes in the basement. He walks around the house, nothing. And something keeps knocking on this door, and he keeps hearing stuff outside, and he's already checked. He's checked multiple times, and there's nothing. And it's spooking him at this point. And then they're still watching TV again, and something keeps knocking on the door in the basement. It keeps knocking on the door. And eventually they decide to go to bed. Like, we're going to go lay down. We're going to go to bed, because they don't understand what's going on, and it's scaring them. And they go lay down, and they're not asleep yet. And they hear something attack the cat in the living room. And the cat is screaming, and you can hear banging and all over the place. Like, and they jump up and they run in there, and the cat has hair plugs pulled out of it. There's hair pulled out of the cat, and something has beat the cat all over this room. And the cat just wants outside. It's at the front door trying to go outside. They open the front door and they let the cat out, and the cat runs out to the mailbox to the road, will not come back on the property, will not come back in the house. And they got their stuff, like whatever they could get right then, and they left. They left that house right then. And they had a family friend. They paid a family friend that wasn't afraid, that didn't care about it, to go inside there and move all of their stuff out. They didn't come back in the house after that. The cat wouldn't come back in the house after that. So That's one of the scarier things that I've ever heard, because there's absolutely no explanation for it. And I mean, it has to be haunted. What is that? Like, you can't explain that. You cannot make sense of that. Just no way.
Let me just start this by saying I've lived in the Appalachian Mountains my whole life, and I've experienced a lot of weird, unsettling, unexplainable things, if you will. So anyways, the story all begins with my dog Beans and how he made this low growl that I've never, ever, ever heard from him before. And I mean, like, scary, like, really defensive. I've never heard it, nothing like it before. He's a border collie German shepherd, so he's got like a little bit of protection in him, you know what I mean? He's got that instinct, but nothing I had ever heard before like this sound. Not even to mention, he literally never growls anyway, so this was already like a red flag that he was growling. Like, it honestly sounded like he was getting ready to fight for his life or fight for my life or something. I took him out around like 11 p.m. and he would not leave my side. So I noticed that my workshop door was open, so I walked over to close it, right? And he was right by my side the entire time, like glued to me. He also just kept trying to get in between my legs while he was still growling. All of his hackles and all of his hair was standing up on the back of his neck and all straight down his back like some kind of freaking feral animal. I don't know. So I closed my workshop door, and right as I do so, all breaks loose out in the woods. I do not, guys. It sounded like 50 full-grown men just broke out in sprint out in the middle of the woods. Like, it sounded like they were ripping through the woods. 50 full-grown men, or like just some big mob, like a big mob of people. Trees were shaking, branches were falling. You could feel the thunderous like thumps of the ground shaking. We get back in the house before I my freaking pants, and we grab my husband's pistol/mag light so I can look outside and see what the is out there. So when Beanie and I get back outside to investigate and see what the going on out there, we are literally surrounded by a bunch of mumbling voices. The sound was coming from everywhere. It sounded like Bose speakers were all around everywhere of just people mumbling, and I was flashing lights around. I couldn't see anybody anywhere, but the sound was everywhere. I know it wasn't some kind of animal because I could make out what sounded close to words, but it wasn't actual words. Like, it was just so jumbled and weird that I couldn't actually make out what it sounded like, but it did sound like a word that I would know. I almost immediately felt sick when I heard all of this, and it felt like I got flu symptoms right then and there. Back inside the house, it sounded like people were walking around my house all night long. All of my windows were creaking, at least the ones in my bedroom where I was. You could clearly hear the sound of shoes crunching on gravel around outside. I was so terrified I couldn't even fall asleep, which is unusual for me because even in like the scariest of situations, I have been able to still fall asleep. But that night, the air just felt thick and evil. That's honestly the only way I can explain it. Like, imagine a soaking wet quilt being thrown over top of you and having to sleep under it all night. That's how I felt. Just that like weird, icky, gross, uncomfortable, like something's wrong here feeling. To this day, I have absolutely no explanation as to what that could have been. I truly don't know.
I'm walking home from a friend's house. It's around midnight because why not? Grew up in the mountains. That's where I spent most of my time. Walking home. It's autumn. I hear leaves rustling underneath my feet. I'm very sad because of stuff under things. So swish, swish, swish with my feet going down the road. There's a few lights on the way home, so it's not pitch black the entire way, so it's really nice. Anyway, I actually prefer the pitch black because then your eyes adjust and then you can see a lot better, but anyway, whatever. So I'm at one of the darker spots of the road, and I'm still a good maybe half mile from the house. I don't know. Distance wasn't a thing for me. You just kept walking until you got there. Miles or what, it didn't matter. As I was walking, I started getting that strange like fear sensation where you're just like, something's up. Like, I feel like somebody's watching me. So I ended up kind of just starting to pay attention to that. But I've learned throughout the years that if you start feeling afraid of something, maintain consistency with what you're doing so you don't notify whatever's watching you that you know that they're watching. So I stayed walking. I stayed breathing the same. I kept my heart rate the same. I kept everything, very fluid. Because I grew up with a lot of animals and a lot of farm animals and stuff. And they respond a lot better when you're able to maintain your calm. Doing everything that I can to keep myself calm and to not notify whatever's watching me that I know that they're watching me. And so this goes on for a good, it feels like forever. It feels like it's been like minutes, but I'm sure it's only been a few seconds that I'm noticing this, all of this is going on. And then I get to a point where, for whatever reason, I wanted to see how close it was. So I stopped walking very abruptly. It was right beside me. I don't know what it was, but all I hear is of the steps going along in the leaves right beside me. Because I started listening out. I was like, okay, I don't hear anything, but how is it still watching me as I'm walking? Like, I had walked enough to where nothing should have been able to see me. If I was standing still, of course it could keep watching me. But if you're walking down a path, then it has to either be following you or ahead of you as you're walking. But I walked enough to where I'm like, I should have passed it by now. This feeling is still there. So yeah, no, I almost brick. My whole everything, like I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I felt the cold sweat. When I realized it was literally right beside me, I was like, this may not be human. This sucks. Cause you can't, what are you going to do? Run from it? Like, even human things or animals, like, you run from it, they chase. Like, even if they're not wanting to attack you, run from your cat, run from your dog. They will pounce on you, even if in play. So yeah, and if the intentions are not good, that's not good. We don't do that. Us in West Virginia, we grow up knowing you don't run away from things that want to attack you most of the time, especially if you know you're not going to get away. Because there was nowhere for me to go. There's trees on either side of me. There's nowhere to go. So yeah, I was very, very, very lucky because in that moment of me realizing that it is quite literally right beside me, my breath stops. I feel the terror. I feel like I'm like, I might die. I might die today. Maybe it thought that I was an easy target or something. I don't know where this confidence came out, but I started walking and I started making myself feel as big as I could get. Again, teenage whatever. I don't know what this is. So I'm walking and then all of a sudden I see headlights come up. So there's headlights. They shone right there. But I want to preface this by saying why I was walking at midnight on an Appalachian road. So I was at home. I was doing my normal thing. I was just like playing games or whatever. I think I was around 14. I can't remember. And my stepdad comes in the room and he's freaking out and he's like, oh my God, you need to come here. And so I go and I like follow him over to their bedroom, my parents' bedroom. And I see my mom and she is like stick straight as a board, like wedged in between the bed and the wall. And she is like shaking uncontrollably. And I'm just like, oh crap. Okay. So I like kneel down. I try to move her to where she won't hurt herself as she's flailing. Obviously a seizure. First time I've ever seen her have one. And I like kept as calm as I could. I moved her safely. I made sure that she was, not biting her tongue or anything. Like, there's really not much you can do that I know of whenever people are having seizures other than just be there for them and make sure they don't hit anything or hurt themselves. But yeah, so my mom had literally just had a seizure. I helped her through it. It had scared me so bad because she stopped breathing during that. And I remember like taking her shoulders in my hands and just staring her in the face. And she was like not looking at me. And she was like looking off in the distance at nothing. And she looked honestly like she had passed away. She stopped breathing and everything. And I remember just looking at her and shaking her, like just one quick shake and yelling her name. Like I felt like I was like trying to reach into her soul to try to pull her back. And she looked at me for a second and recognized me and was like, oh baby. And then like started having another seizure. And it wasn't as bad as the first one, but it was kind of bad. But like after I got her out of it, she did the weird like 10 seconds, like repeating herself and stuff, but I was able to get her calmed down and everything. And then we dealt with that and I left her with my stepdad hoping that he would like, call the ambulance or somebody to like take care of her. But I wasn't the adult, so I left. And I was in shock. So I needed to calm down and take care of myself at that point. Now that I knew that she was okay, she was safe, and I was hoping she was in good hands. unfortunately, he never called any help, but fortunately, she was okay. And the person who came to get me, like, came after me was my mom. And it's so weird because I never told her where I was going. I never told anybody where I was going. I literally just went walking to help myself calm down and deal with everything that had just happened and process it. And, middle of the night, lights, like, right in my face. And to see her come and, like, I asked her, like, why did you come get me? Because I was right down the road. It wasn't like I was, like, going miles down the road or anything. And it wasn't like the weather was bad or anything. But so she ends up picking me up, and I asked her how she knew where I was, and she said, I just knew. And I was like, is everything okay? She said, no. Why did you leave? Are you okay? Like, she was freaking out on me. And I asked her why. She said, I had a feeling something bad was going to happen. And I was like, huh. So yeah, I don't know. People can believe whatever they want, connections with people, whatever, like the gut feelings, but that was pretty cool. I feel like I was saved that day. Just saying.
So when I moved from the San Francisco area to Georgia, it was a big change, just the northern part of Georgia. And as some of you know, the Appalachian Mountains also has a lot of stories of like scary stuff, creepy stuff, and like, just like experiences that people had to that whole mountain range, right? My grandpa's house was very big when we moved there and had a lot of land, had a bunch of acres, a lot of trees, bunch of trails, like a bunch of stuff like that. There'd be trails that would like pop up out of nowhere that I've never seen before. I don't know, but I just remember us finding trails that were never there, and we still do to this day. Like, we would find shrines of it would be tree stumps, but shrines everywhere. And then we'd go far into the woods and stuff, and then we'd find like skulls of like goats and animals and stuff. Sometimes they'd be in it, like they'd be on a tree, or they would be in the shrines, which is really weird. What was also weird is that there was a truck that was on a tree. Like the tree like grew through the truck, and the truck was like up here, so we could look up and you just see a truck and a tree through it. I don't know. It was really weird, but especially at night, I would see stuff. In the summer of 2020, me and a group of my friends went to go camp. It was my grandpa's acres. It was his property and stuff, right? I thought it was a fun idea. I wasn't really scared that much because we're all in the group. Or we decided to go to the house that's right over the trees. That was actually our old neighbor that passed away maybe like 3-4 years prior. Still nothing has changed. Like in front of his house is it's like metal police wire. All of the trees have like wiring stuff going all through it, right? And we decided to walk over there and explore because there's a rusty barn that's extremely creepy, and it has like 2 levels to it inside. Also a shed that has like a bunch of baby toys and baby dolls and like creepy stuff right there. It was like 1 a.m. too. Figured out how to get into the house. The house was like it was sealed off by wood in the back, so he opened the wood and then they went and then opened the doors for us. We got inside and I told my friend not to take anything. We explored. We were looking around. There's an attic. One weird thing though, in the attic there was a red light that was on, and I thought that was really strange, and I pointed out to my friends, but they didn't really like pay attention to it. But it was a red light, like a glowing light in the attic. There was these golden golf clubs and I think like a golden gun or something, and my friend was like, bro, what if we take this and then he gets all money? And I was like, no, don't do that. That guy's probably gonna come back and haunt you. And I was joking with him with that too. Like, I was kidding. He ended up taking it without me knowing. And as we were walking out, there's like a light that hangs down from the ceiling that you can literally just unscrew and pop back in, basically. But for some reason, as we walked past it, it fell and shattered on the ground, and all of us turned around. Like, it scared the shit out of us. And then we opened there's the door. There's another door and then a screen door. We opened all of them and we locked them and stuff, and closed it and everything. We're walking out, and as we literally got to the bottom of the steps, the doors literally open, and like we heard the doorknob open, like unlock open, and then all of the doors opened at once. And my friend got so scared that he grabbed me and threw me towards the doors. I don't know why that he did that, and ran. One of my friends ran into the police wire that was in front of the house. He ran into it so hard, he did a full backflip and knocked the wind out of himself. So he's crawling
my friend has to pick him up because of what's happening. All of us are just sprinting out of the woods and stuff like that, and then we finally make it to the street. Oh yeah, another thing too, my uncle he has autism. He came up to me one time, right? Because like I'm closest to him. He's not close to anybody else in the family, but he's closest to me. So me and him talk to each other. He's a lot older too. He's like, what, 38 maybe? But he came up and told me that he kept hearing things that made him want to go to the house that we were just at, right? And apparently he went over there. He went inside the house and he found that was in the house, right? And he was telling me that the TV was talking to him, that he wasn't going to listen to the TV anymore. And I guess it was like a TV at the house, the bandit house. He said he was listening to it and he didn't want to listen to it anymore because it was scaring him, because it was talking to him or something. And then he came back and he told me that, and I was like, what the like, that's creepy as. And obviously most of the family doesn't believe him with stuff like that, just because of like his diagnosis or something like that. But I know him well enough to like understand when he lies about things and doesn't, but he seemed to be telling the truth. So I don't know. That was pretty creepy to me. I do remember my parents saying that they see stuff at the house all the time or hear stuff. I remember me and my friends seeing like random smoke coming from the ground. And then I remember seeing people that were walking around the trails that like just disappeared. I remember there was one time that me and my friend saw a naked guy in the woods too. We ran home. I remember telling his parents. Parents didn't believe us and stuff, so that was kind of annoying. But I still remember that like that image in my head of that. There's also a time where downstairs there's these two doors that would like that you could open to go outside or whatever. But it was really weird because it was extremely windy. And then my dad was next to me sleeping, and then the doors opened and swung open and slammed, and my dad woke up screaming. And my dad told me that like he had a dream that somebody was coming in there to hurt us, and that he like woke up screaming. So he saw the person walk through the doors in his dream to open the doors, but then the doors opened because of the storm. Freaked me out. Sometimes we'd hear people talking, they're not there. There was one time where me and my friend were waiting for my friend to come, and the woods got completely silent. And I already knew what that meant because I learned about that. The woods got completely silent. And I looked at my friend and I was like, what the? And then the bushes and stuff, it sounded like something was moving through the bushes around us because we were in the driveway. There was like sounds of like something moving in the bushes and stuff. One was right here, one was behind us, one was this way. And then I remember a wind just started picking up really quick, and like everything got all like intense, and like whatever was back there was moving, and me and my friend were looking at each other all freaked out. And all of a sudden my friend got there and he like speeds into the driveway like all crazy, and then all of a sudden it just stops. Obviously, I'd liked exploring stuff, but I never went by myself. I always like exploring places like with my friends and stuff. And I remember going at night one time, and literally, I swear, all of us stopped and looked, and we could barely like picture something standing there that we couldn't see, but it looked like a person. But it was standing there looking at us, and it was walking closer to us, but like really slow. And it didn't like. It looked like a shadow walking towards us, and we like ran through the bushes and stuff like that to get to the other side. But the weird thing is that sometimes when we'd get freaked out or like we try to like leave, the trails would like, it's like we completely forget like the trails. Like we would get lost and go in circles and circles and circles. And one time we were stuck in it for hours, like walking through those trails. It's like we'd go to one trail, then we think we're going back, and then all of a sudden we're like way farther than we were. Even though there's like, I don't know. I think that I don't know if the area just messes with people's heads or something or whatever, but it's like we couldn't get out of the woods. Like we'd go far into it. Even though we remember how to go back, we'd try to go back, we'd end up somewhere else. It's like we kept getting stuck in there. So me and my friends would always have like 2 or 3 people at the front so that like they could yell for us. There was a time where, I don't know, I think there's like a bunch of like people who live deep into those woods that
probably live there forever. But the Appalachian Mountains are beautiful. Like, it's beautiful nature, but like, you go deep into that, it's like you get in a completely different territory. I mean, I'm pretty sure other people have different experiences with that stuff. I remember hearing people that lived there, like, just tell me all these stories, what not to do, and like, don't listen to certain things, and like, if you hear people's names, or if you hear your name getting called, or if you hear whistling in the woods, or don't whistle in the woods, like, people, like, older people would tell me that stuff because they lived there for so long.
Okay, so I have no idea what exactly it was that we saw that night. My friends and I go camping a lot, and our favorite place is the Red River Gorge here in eastern Kentucky. It's the closest place to where I live where you can see the Milky Way pretty much every single night. Our first experiences night hiking, we would go to trails that we knew well and were frequently used during the day. Ones with lots of fences and gazebo resting places like the Natural Bridge, which is like a 2 to 4 mile hike uphill, just depending on your starting point. Hiking on this trail at night is not allowed, but it's the woods, and I've never been one to care much about closing times for the literal outside. This night was weird to begin with. Almost as soon as we got going on the hike, the clouds started taking over, and we started to get the impression that we were going stargazing at pretty much nothing. But we went anyways, just in case it cleared out by the time we got up to the top, because you just never know with Kentucky weather. In the beginning, it was just the normal paranoia that was keeping us so stressed and quiet. You know you've reached the bottom of the bridge when you see a giant wall of limestone. It's after hours at this point, so no skylift rides have gone on for hours. And the rangers had already done their sweep and left right before we got out of the car and headed up. I guess I have to make these points because this is what I was thinking to myself when, like, out of nowhere, a girl appeared with a headlamp. And she begins to walk down the trail that we're looking out at. She was in a sundress and flip-flops. And while this is a fairly easy hike, it wouldn't be easy with no water or no real shoes, especially after dark. Her light was bright, and when she reached to where the trail turned down to where we were sitting, she just stopped. She just stood there straight on. She was just sitting there staring at all of us, and I had to bring, like, my arm up to shield my eyes from the light because it was so bright. And it was shining, like, directly in my eyes. She didn't turn away from our lights at all or even seem to be bothered that she had 6 LED lamps shining right in her eyes. I said hello, and she kind of replied, but with, like, a pause between every single word, something like, "Hello, how are you?" I said, "I'm good, how are you?" And she took even longer pauses, and she was like, "Oh, I'm fine." She then just stood there with her hands to her side and just staring at us. Her light made it impossible to see her face, and I had my hand up the entire time because her light was just so bright. Until finally she just turned and slowly walked down the trail part that we had just came up from. She got to a part where the trail, like, turned, and we could see her light, like, just stopped there for a minute until she turned and the light faded out of sight. After that, we waited a little while before we headed on up. I made comments about how weird that just was, and everybody just made it out to me being always afraid. So we got up after a bit, and we started back up to the top. We laid down, and we tried to stargaze, but the clouds were even thicker at this time, and we were all miserably hot. We could hear voices at times, and my friend kept checking for the people that we heard. We saw a flashlight, and we never saw anyone attached to it. And then we heard, like, a bird call. But it wasn't like a real bird noise. It was like some person doing bird calls. Like rhythmic and not really natural at all. I was convinced that we weren't alone and hadn't been alone, but I'm the most easily spooked. I asked to leave whenever they were ready, and they were all ready to leave right then and there, which kind of scared me too. You know, just knowing that they're all just as afraid as I am at this point. We began going back downhill the same way that we came up, but it felt like it was taking so long. We were moving steady and quick, and it was all downhill, but it felt like we were making no grounds at all. It's hard to explain, but at one point I even said this feels much longer than the way up, and they all agreed. Okay, so now we're walking in like a semi-flattish area, at least compared to the downhill that we had been doing. The handrail or the wooden fence or whatever it is all on the left side of us. We're all walking in a row when all of a sudden my friend says, "What's that?" But the question was more of like an alert, so I moved my headlamp in that direction, and I don't see anything at first. At the same time, all 6 of our lights start to shine and like reflect off of a light gray creature. It's bent in a crouching position, sitting on its right leg, and it starts to turn towards us. It starts to stand up, but my mind is like racing at this point. It almost looks human, but it's too big. It's tall and thin, and it was so light gray that it was almost white, and its skin almost resembled dolphin skin. Like, it has a shine to it, like it reflects in the light when our headlamps hit it. It's gradually coming to a full standing position in front of us. Its head is long, and its eyes are in like a human position on the front of its face, like not like an animal, like on the side of its face. I couldn't see any other facial features, almost just big empty holes or pits for its eyes. Its arms hung down low by its knees, and its hands seemed to be long too. I'm gonna guess it stood at like 9 feet or so tall, and it was right there in front of us. It had no hair, like at all. And it had a big head. Like I couldn't process what I was seeing. I was just frozen, and I felt my friend hitting me, just saying, run, run, run. I start to understand that we have to get away from this thing, and that's when it pivots and runs to the right, going backwards along the trail so it can get around the barrier and get on the trail behind us. We took off running down the trail, knowing in our minds that that thing took off a lot faster than we did. It didn't talk at all because when we tried, it felt like we were going to get caught. We kept running just as fast as we could, but some areas were just so steep. It never felt like we were out of the sight of this creature, not even for a second. As we made it to the trailhead with like the gravel, we could hear something crashing down in the forest beside us. We all just ran as fast as we could and jumped in the car, and we drove down the road just as fast as we could until we got to the main road, and then the sky cleared up, and then the stars came out.
We've talked about granny witches a lot around here over the last few months. You know, these older ladies who are well versed in the old ways of healing and taking care of folks, herbs and things like that. White magic, some people call it. Now, if there's white magic, there's sure to be black magic. And it can absolutely be found right here in the hills of eastern Kentucky. Growing up here in eastern Kentucky, you learn pretty quick there's just some sections of some hollers you don't traverse in for one reason or another. Well, there's this young fella named Benny who lived in Coon Creek Cemetery Road and lived way up in there, but there was a fella that lived just below him that gave him the willies something awful. This man was Old Man Hendricks, they called him. Everybody said he was a warlock. Said he jinxed Old Man Johnson's cow into giving sour milk, and Farmer Wheel's crops to wither right in the field. Old Man Hendricks didn't go to the Baptist church on Sunday morning. He didn't go to the Pentecostal church Sunday afternoon. Never went to any church anybody knew of, but they was tales on Saturday night. He could be found out in the middle of the woods dancing around a bonfire. Well, Benny knew to avoid Old Man Hendricks, but boys will be boys, and sometimes they can't help but fall right into trouble. Benny was walking by the house one day, and there's a gravel sitting in the middle of the road. Something just made Benny grab it and heave it right at Old Man Hendricks' house, and he heard the glass shatter. Well, Benny ran to beat the devil all the way up the holler to his house. Was sure Old Man Hendricks didn't see him, but 2 days later he knew better. Because 2 days later he walked home from school, found his prize hunting dog lying in front of the house. Innards all pulled out, blood everywhere. His mom and dad said a coyote come through, probably took care of that dog, and that's what happened. Benny knew better. Benny knew it was Old Man Hendricks, because inside that coon dog's mouth, he found that rock. It wasn't long after that, Benny was walking home from school and heard a strange noise coming from up the hill a little bit, and as he got closer, he heard it was Old Man Hendricks singing some song he'd never heard before, singing in some language he'd never heard before, but it was coming out rich and deep. And the old man was singing and singing. It sort of just captured Benny, calling him in almost like a siren. For he knew it, he was walking up the hill towards Old Man Hendricks' house. The smell of old pipe smoke filled the air. See, Old Man Hendricks always had a pipe, and it was in his hand, and in between verses, he'd take a draw. Benny got closer and closer. Didn't know why. Just couldn't stop. Old Man Hendricks up there, black teeth, age spots, looking just awful. Benny kept on coming. As he got closer, Old Man Hendricks shot out a bony, withered hand and motioned for the boy. See, they's locked in eyes, but Old Man Hendricks never quit singing. He sang the whole time. Benny kept getting closer and closer and closer, till finally he was within a foot old man Hendrix's house when a horn sounded. "Benny, what are you doing? Leave old man Hendrix alone." Benny kind of shook and looked down. There was his pa on the road in the fruit truck that they had. And his dad says, "Sorry, Mr. Hendrix. The boy didn't mean to bother you." "Just curious, I suppose," said the old man. Benny climbed down the hill and hopped in his daddy's truck. "Son, what are you doing? What are you thinking?" Benny said, "Daddy, I don't know. I wasn't thinking. Something made me go up there. I just couldn't stop." Benny's dad said, "From now on, you come to town after school. You can ride home with me. You can sit around the store till it's time to go home." It was about a week or two later. Benny was lying in the bed. It was the middle of the night, and there was the awfulest commotion coming down the road. Well, by the time he got outside to the porch, his mom and dad was already there talking to somebody. He looked, and the county's fire truck was parked there, and then the fire chief was talking to Benny's dad and said, "Yeah, the house is a total loss. I don't know if old man Hendrix was inside, but it's burnt to about nothing. If he was in there, he didn't make it." Benny's dad said, "They got any, what caused did his stove mess up? What happened? Was he smoking in the bed?" And the fire chief said, "Well, we don't know for sure, but it looked like there was some coal oil or something in the corner that caught. So whatever it was, it went fast. We're going to head up the holler and fill up the water truck at the old pond, and then we're going to put another load on the houses so it don't spread any further." "Chief, thank you for all your work," said Benny's dad. He waved and the truck went on. That's when Benny noticed something. In the tailgate of his dad's truck, there was a can. Kerosene can. Always lived in his workshop. Daddy always made a point to put his stuff up. But that kerosene can sitting on the tailgate. Nobody saw old man Hendrix after that day. He must have died in that fire. Benny went on with his life, but he never could get that thought of that song out of his head. And every time he smelled pipe smoke, it sent chills down his spine.
Want to hear a scary story? I grew up in Appalachia for 27 years. This is how my childhood was. The first experience I ever had that I can remember, I was 4 years old, and we were going to leave early in the morning for a family vacation. My first vacation I was ever going to be on. Now, we lived out in the middle of absolute nowhere in Jackson County, Tennessee, at the base of the Appalachian Mountains. We had left when it was still dark outside, and we were heading down the hill. And before we had made it out of the holler, we actually had to stop because there was a dark horse that was standing right in the middle of the road, square in the middle of the headlights. Now, I remember I was asleep in the back seat, and my parents actually woke me up from tapping the brakes. And I look, and I remember seeing this horse, and I remember my parents talking about it, like how strange it was, wondering if it was one of our horses, but it was about a mile away from home. And then a man out of nowhere walks up and grabs the horse by the reins, and then he walks away with it. Now, if you want to know how this road was, it was a mountain on one side, like a sheer, too steep to walk up mountain. And on the other side, it was way too steep to go down. We have no idea where this man went, but he did not pass our vehicle. Not only that, he had no light source. To this day, we have no good explanation for it, but my parents talked about it so much on the way to this destination. As I got older, I looked up, and there's actually a lot of stories of the dark horses in that area. Now, this man, I remember in my head him being white, so I don't think it was anything Native American related, even though that area had tons of Native American leftover landmarks and cultural findings. National Geographic actually came out and excavated, like, right behind our family home. Trailer, I should say. We weren't that high class yet. The next thing, this is also between the ages of 4 and 5. I used to go fishing at the pond that was directly in front of our trailer. Now, once again, if you guys don't really know how homes in Appalachian Mountains work, you mostly live in almost like compound communities. So everybody on this hill was actually members of my family. So my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, we all lived on this road that my grandpa originally made with a bulldozer. And it was actually named after him. It's called Billbuck Lane. So when I was a child, I ran free because I had people that could watch me out of any window. I mean, everybody was either a cousin or an uncle or a grandparent within a couple miles of us. So I used to fish at this pond, and my parents could see me from the window, or my mom when she was out in the yard could see me. And I could swim really good as a child. Anybody in the Appalachian area can. So there's no risk of me drowning. And I would go down there and I would spend hours by myself fishing with worms I had dug up from the ground. It's my favorite thing to do. And I used to tell my cousin about the man that would watch me fish and make sure that I was safe. I actually have no recollection of this whatsoever, besides just the faint memory of there being somebody there when I fished most of the time. And my cousin Danny, he was older than me, and he actually would tell me that that was the wild man, or what I now know as Bigfoot, that roamed in this hillside. My uncle would tell me so many stories of his encounters with this wild man, this Bigfoot out there, these hoops and hollers and these yelps that he would hear all the time. It is stuck with our family so much, and it's so common in our family to know that in this area that we just call him wild man. We steer clear of them. We avoid them. If we think we're hearing them, we don't make a scene about it and call back or make a big ruckus or, go post about it and tell everybody go looking for this thing. It's been about 10 years since I've heard any of my family talk about wild man. Now, this guy never talked to me when I was a kid, apparently, is what I would tell my cousin, that he would just watch me from the bushes and watch me from the tree line. And the only faint remembrance that I can have of it is I do remember a head peeking out from behind of a tree while I was fishing, and it used to make me feel comfortable knowing that somebody was watching me fish. As an adult telling that story, I'm going to move a little bit closer to my light. Now, between the ages of 5 and 6, I had one big happening that sticks with me really heavy. And the reason I can remember I was between 5 and 6 exactly is because we did move away from that compound family home to a actual brick house in the city. And this is still in Tennessee. It's actually the Cookeville area. And I remember having a racetrack that I could put together. If you guys remember those magnetic racetracks where the cars would go really fast on the little magnet tracks and you had the little controllers for them. I remember I used to put this thing together all the time, and it was so complicated and hard to put together, at least for my 5 to 6 year old brain. And we only lived in this house for a year. That's how I know exactly how old I was. And I remember putting this racetrack together, and it had these little yellow guardrails that went around the outside of it, and they just clipped into the side of the track. I remember my box was behind me, and I was reaching back and grabbing the pieces and just putting it together. And I remember I looked back behind me to get a piece out of this box. So I looked back, and one of those yellow guardrails was about 8 to 10 inches off the ground, and it seemed to just be suspended there, like it was floating. And I remember just freezing. Like right now in my head, I can see it so clear. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't like some kind of screen memory fake thing. It was, I used to play a lot as a child, like alone a lot as a child. You'll hear that in my stories. I was what's known as a latchkey kid. A lot of us 90s kids were. And I remember looking around, and it was like I was so scared I couldn't get any words out. And I knew my mom was in the kitchen and my dad was at work. And I remember I jumped up and I just screamed, and I ran and told my mom in the kitchen. She was talking on the phone, and she really kind of sorry, Mom, but you brushed me off. And I would too, if a little kid told me that, overactive imagination or whatever. I used to love scary stuff my whole life. But I can remember that, in my head, I can see this clear as day. And what was weird about that is that time in my life, because I moved away from all my family that I ever had and my friends, I used to make, and I played a lot alone. I used to make up an imaginary friend. And I remember the imaginary friend that I had. He wasn't a Easter bunny, costume type deal, not man in a costume. But I remember my imaginary friend looking like a rabbit that was wearing overalls, but he was like a half man, half rabbit wearing overalls. I remember that. Clear as day, I can see that imaginary friend in my head. And for whatever reason, after that, I never wanted to imagine this imaginary friend ever again. I never wanted to have anything to do with this imaginary friend, because I think I did something called a topa. If you've never heard of that, a topa is when you imagine something so hard it becomes real. You guys might have seen that movie Imaginary a few years ago, and that's kind of what it felt like. And I didn't know this as a kid. I just remember thinking, I don't want him to come play anymore. I don't want him to come play anymore. And that's actually really sad that I'm thinking about it, that I made him up because I moved away from my family and everybody I ever knew. Not everything was ghosts and goblins, though, and Bigfoot. There were some very real things in the Appalachian Mountains that happened. It's kind of dark. I saw my first dead body when I was like 7 years old. So, from somebody who'd been murdered, not just a dead body at a funeral. So me and my cousin Cody, we used to play together every weekend because I did get taken back to that family, like, compound type area, that holler every weekend of my life until I was 18. And it was by choice. I wanted to go back there. And so I would stay with my grandparents on Friday night and I wouldn't come back until like Sunday afternoon. And those are those are my best memories of my entire life, is growing up in the hills of Jackson County, Tennessee, surrounded by my cousins and my family. Cody and Danny, if you're watching this, I freaking love you. Katie, love you. Luke, Kyle, obviously love you guys. It was a magical childhood. It really was. But something in those woods calls in like a darkness to it. And there is no areas up there that are void of these kind of stories I'm about to tell next, that are dark, real humans, which are the realest monsters that are out there. So me and Cody were sitting on the porch and we noticed that Opal, our neighbor that lived down the hill, and he was like a distant cousin of ours. And, he was on laying on his front porch, and the way the hill was shaped, he was a little bit higher than us. So we could just see like his feet hanging off the porch. So we decided to go up to Cody's house and get some binoculars so we could see better. And we remember looking at him and it looked like he was taking a nap on his front porch. And we're just like looking like, man, Opal's napping at 11 a.m. He's hitting the bottle early, which he didn't drink. Family that knows Opal, I'm sorry. And all of a sudden a helicopter comes down out of the sky and there's FBI cars pulling in. Like, I'd never seen this. Like, this is in the middle of nowhere. A helicopter lands in my grandpa's cow field. Remember, it scared the cows, scared us. And we're like watching, we're like, oh my, this is Red Dawn. Like, I'd watched Red Dawn before and I was like, these are the Russians. We're dying, but it was just the feds. And they stormed that trailer house of theirs. And essentially Opal and his brother had a giant grow farm, like way back in the woods. And underneath their trailer, just like that one country song, they had stashes and stashes of cash and everything else, like all the stuff. And that morning, I guess they knew that the feds were onto them, and his brother actually shot him dead on the porch, and ran off with all the money. And they did catch up to him. They caught him. He was on his way to Mexico. And, that was just a weird, wild time. And I remember like that stuck with me for a while because like, that was right next to the pond I used to fish at every day that I was telling you about earlier. That pond was actually in between their house and my house. And, it's just, you never really know anybody. You never really know who people are, that one got dark and this next one's going to get a little darker. So fast forward maybe a couple years. And this is the one that bothered me more than anything that's ever happened to me in almost in my entire life. There was a recent, I'm not going to get into that happened recently, but anyhow, that was on the news and stuff like, so when fast forward a couple years, I'm spending the night at my cousin Danny's house, and me and Danny loved anything spooky. Like I said, those woods, there's something in those woods that just call to you to want to be scared and to look up horrid things, and just there's just something magical about it. And I can't describe it unless you're there. You don't know what I'm talking about. Like, it's like if you listen closely, you can hear the woods talking to you. So we used to love to go out in the woods at night and get each other scared and tell creepy stories like I'm doing right now. And that's where my love of this actually began, is my cousin Danny scaring the absolute living daylights out of me. And I'll spend the night at his house, and like I did a lot of times. And and that was the cool thing about growing up in this family compound, is we never really knew where we were going to end up that night. Cause like we might spend the night at Maul's house. We might spend the night at Danny's house. We might spend the night at Cody's house. Like, we didn't know where we were going to end up. We just ride our bikes everywhere and just be wild kids. It was great. But sometimes there's people in the woods watching you be wild kids, and they know that you might be a little left unattended, because we'd spend the night at his house. We had watched a scary movie just like every other night. And that's why no one believed me at first until they caught him, is I'm asleep in his bed and I was against the wall, which is next to the window. And in these country homes at nighttime, a lot of times you don't sleep with the air conditioning on. You just raise the windows. So there would be nothing but a screen separating you and outside. If you know Appalachia rules, it's actually kind of a big no-no not to have the curtains drawn, because you're never supposed to be looking outside in the dark through the windows. Because like I said, things that look out also look in. And I got up in the middle of the night, and I'm super thirsty, like, all the time in my real life. Like, I'm always drinking something. Like, anybody who knows me knows that I've always got a water, a lemonade, a Coke. I've always got something. And I wake up, and I'm like, man, I'm thirsty. I'll get up and get some of Aunt Mary's lemonade, 'cause it was like superb lemonade. And I get up and I go make me a glass of lemonade. I'm trying to be quiet with the ice, and I go to go back to bed. And there's a man in the window looking down at my cousin Danny while he's asleep. And he's just like 2 foot away from Danny. He would have been right over me if I'd have still been laying in bed. And he might have been there when I first got up. I truly don't know. I doubt it, because I feel like he'd have ran, because he ran after I screamed bloody murder. Like, I just, ah, and I'm just screaming. The dogs are going nuts outside, and my Uncle Donnie and my Aunt Mary, they wake up. Of course, Danny wakes up, and this dude just books it. And I remember he had like this long, shaggy hair. The way I could describe him is, if you've seen that old Dennis the Menace movie in the 90s, the guy who plays like from Back in the Future, the kidnapper in that movie, the long brown hair, but this hair was white, but it was like that long, shaggy hair, and that's kind of how this guy looked. It's just like an old, like kind of like the wild man I told you about earlier, but this was definitely a human. Like, this was definitely a person, like, wearing clothes and stuff. And he ran into the woods. And I remember my Uncle Donnie's like, what? My Uncle Donnie's a really big guy. And he goes, I tell him what happened. And he goes, you were just dreaming. You woke up from a bad dream. But I'm standing there with a cup of lemonade with like ice, and like, I was like, no, I don't think I was asleep, and sleepwalked and made this lemonade and everything else. And then once they realized, like, oh, you weren't in bed when this happened, like, you were up walking around, and like, then you saw it. I was like, yeah. So he walked outside, and sure enough, there was footprints that led, like, the grass. This was like really, really early in the morning, like really early. So the grass was all dewy. So you could see actually where the grass compressions were in the ground, leading right up to the window. And the dogs were still going nuts looking back at the woods. And about a week later, my Uncle Donnie actually came home from work, like earlier on his lunch break or something. And there was a guy trying to like look in the front window, and they ended up calling the cops. And, I truly don't know if they ever caught the guy, or if whatever, but at least I was validated with my uncle saw him like the next week or the same week, looking at, holy. When you're not expecting to see an emu and you're telling a scary story. If you're watching on the podcast, I apologize. There was an emu. His name is Harry. He walked up to me and drummed, which is the noise emus make, very loudly. It can be heard from over 2 miles away. It's actually not physically very loud. It's a deep vibration that you can feel over 2 miles away. I forgot he was there. I let him out tonight and scared the heck out of me. Anyhow, the story of playing hide and go seek in the dark in Appalachia. We used to love playing hide and go seek in the dark. You've heard me say it a few times in this video. I'll say it again. Something in the woods of Appalachia wants you to be out there at nighttime. Every kid that I grew up with, we yearned to do things in the dark, in the woods. And it was just something like, I can't describe. When I think about it, there's like this pit in my stomach that kind of worries me a little bit, but it's the same kind of worry that also excites me. And I don't know how to describe it. It's like it's in your blood or something. And anyhow, we used to play hide and go seek in the dark in Appalachia. And what we would do is my grandma had a basement that was like a fully furnished basement, where half the basement was not underground, or I guess one wall of the basement wasn't underground, but the other 3 walls were. And moonlight would come in through the windows on that side. So you could turn all the lights out in the basement, and you could see the silhouettes of things, but that was it. You could not see any colors, any details. The moonlight would just illuminate just enough where you could see the silhouettes only if your eyes had really adjusted. So how we'd play hide and go seek in the dark is one of us would stand at the light switch with the light switch on. He would close his eyes, or she would close his eyes with their head against the wall, and they would give everybody 60 seconds to hide. And they would count, 1 to 60. And then they would turn the light switch off, and then they would open their eyes, and they would go looking for us in the dark. And we're already hidden. It was a super fun game. Each round took a long time because you're mainly feeling around, and your cousins are going to scare the living daylights out of you when you find them. Like if they're laying on the couch with the couch cushions over them, when you touch the couch cushions, they're going to reach out and grab you and scare you. That's part of the fun. And there's actually something to that. If you know that feeling I'm talking about when you're hiding, waiting to scare someone, it's almost like you get this little tinge of like this evil feeling inside of you. Like you're excited to scare them. It's like you want to feel that fear from them. No one knows truly exactly where that comes from. It's some sinister part of our primitive brain that's there. and we don't know why. So we're all excited, waiting to scare each other. And we're, if you're the one with the lights off and you're looking around, you're excited to get scared a little bit. And so my cousin Kyle was the second youngest of us, and it was his turn to do the light switch. And he was maybe 7 years old at the time, at most. And we were about 10. And I remember I was laying on the couch with the pillows over me, like I just said. And my cousin Danny was laying on this freezer, because there was like essentially no divider walls in this basement. It was like one big rectangle with the exception of a canning room in one corner, a bathroom in the other corner. And then this other corner had a little office. So it was a very big basement with 3 little tiny rooms. That was the only things that led off this room, this big giant rectangle. And the freezer was right next to this little office building that we never went into, like this little office room. And it was my grandpa's room, and it just felt wrong to go in there. And the only way I can describe it is not like wrong, like we'd get in trouble for being there. You guys hear that drumming? That's the emu. So it just felt like if you were in there, something was like in there with you. Like there was this overwhelming, powerful feeling when you were in this room that just felt wrong. Like I'm thinking about being in that room right now, and just thinking about being in that room feels wrong. It almost feels like somebody's looking at me as I'm thinking about being in that room, as I'm visualizing it. I'm laying on the couch. My cousin's laying on the freezer. And we see Kyle's silhouette go in between us, and it goes into that room. And we're like, okay. He's going to come out any second. And all of a sudden, bink! The lights came on. And he had never left the light switch. And me and Danny were just like eyes as big as saucers, because he would have had to pass us to get to this light switch. And even if he would have passed us, he could have never made it there in time unless he was sprinting. And where it was so deathly quiet in this basement, you could hear a pin drop in this basement. Like you could hear every footstep somebody was making. That's how you knew when they were close to you, if you couldn't see them. But we never heard the footsteps going between us. We just thought he was walking very carefully and quiet. And immediately I looked at my cousin. I said, "You see that? Did you see?" That was definitely, that was a silhouette of a little boy right in front. I mean, it was the same size as Kyle. But Kyle never left the light switch. He was too scared. So what he did is when he counted to 60, he turned the lights off and then just stood next to the light switch, terrified to move, and just waited for what he felt like was an okay amount of time, and then turned the lights back on, and then act like he played. And then his cousin Cody even verified. His cousin Cody was like, "I saw you the whole time. You never left the light switch, dude. Like you never left. Like you little chicken, you never left." And then we were like, "Are you sure, Cody, he never left?" And Cody's like, "Yeah, where I was hiding at, I was by the canning room, and I could see the light switch, and I could see his silhouette there the whole time. He never left that light switch." Me and Danny both pale as a ghost. And like Danny's a tan guy, and we're both pale as a ghost. And we tell the rest of the group what we just saw. We're like, there was a little boy that walked right in front of us and actually stood there for a couple seconds before going. Knowing the history of this place, knowing that National Geographic or Discovery Channel, whoever they were, literally uncovered Indian artifacts there and excavated a whole area and it wasn't a totem pole. People got mad at me for saying that last time, but it was like the Cherokee equivalent of a totem pole, whatever, like this big wooden carving that was found out there. They took all that stuff from that area. And we've always said that we think that was a little Indian boy, because my great-great-grandpa was an Indian child found tied to a tree. Now that's on my other side of the family. I essentially got no Indian. My other side of the family, they all have a lot of Native American to them. You can tell it when you're looking at them. Me, I got every colonizer gene there ever was, from my dad's side of the family. But my great-great-grandpa, they had to name him Carson. They don't even know how old he was. And he was found tied to a tree with a bunch of other little Native American boys, and they had already died from starvation. That was something pretty common a long time ago. And he was actually adopted in by our family, and that's how, like I said, that's how he came to be in our family. We guess he was around 2 to 3 years old, maybe 4 at the most. But we've always wondered if that was one of the other boys tied to those trees, or if that was just a Native American boy spirit that belonged there already. Either way, we did not play hide and go seek in the dark anymore that night, and it took us a while before we built up the courage again, but we did play it again. Never saw the shadow of the ghost boy, but in that house, always, we're in that basement, and the staircase was kind of right in the middle of the house, and if you were the only ones home, you would hear footsteps come from the kitchen, and they would go right to the top of that doorway that led down that staircase to where we were at, but the door would never open. You just hear the footsteps. And it became so normal to hear those footsteps, and they would stop right at the top of the staircase. It became so normal that we stopped acknowledging it to the point, and like we would forget about it until somebody, like one of our friends, came over that had never been there before, And like my grandpa would be out in the field working, or my grandma would be like out, in the gardens, because we had these massive gardens. We grew all of our own food and stuff, and you would hear those footsteps, and they'd be like, "Oh, your grandma or grandpa came in," and we'd be like, "Oh, no, they didn't. That's not their footsteps." And sure enough, our friends that would think we were messing with them, and we'd go up there, and there'd be nobody up there. And we're like, "Yeah, those are the footsteps. Like, don't acknowledge that stuff. Like, you got to pretend like you don't hear it, or it becomes more of a habit. Like you're always never supposed to acknowledge these things in the moment that they're happening, because it gives them power." We used to hear those footsteps all the time. And like my family still lives there, and that's still a thing that they all talk about all the time. Like it's a big joke in our family that, "Hey, did you hear the footsteps this week?" As you can imagine, growing up in Appalachia, we did a lot of deer hunting, a lot of turkey hunting. I had 2 really horrifying experiences while I was in the woods hunting. There's a lot of hunters out there that talk about their experiences, but there's a lot more that have these experiences and don't talk about them, because it is very like, the stigma is you don't talk about these things because you're crazy, or you're, a sissy or something. Like that's the norm in these situations. Like you don't want to talk about that stuff. You don't want to act like you were scared. You don't act like you believe in that stuff. Almost every hunter you'll ever find that's hunted a long time by themselves, I got to add that part, by themselves, will say that they have seen some wild stuff in the woods. And if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, please share your stories in the comments. This is a safe place. I like it when people tell me their stories that are similar, and we can kind of put together a roadmap of weird, strange happenings. The first thing that happened was the Whistling Man, which, if you know about the Whistling Man, you know that that is a big no-no to whistle in the dark in Appalachia. It's also a big no-no in Native American folklore. A lot of Native American folklore out here in the Midwest where I live now comes from the East Coast, because in the Trail of Tears, they moved out here. Somebody in one of my videos got upset that I was saying all these Native American traditions, and they're like, "That's just a ripoff from Appalachia." I'm like, hold your horses, first of all. They were there first, and you pushed them out west, so they brought the traditions this way with them. So it's the same traditions, they're, anyhow. We see some weird, spooky things in the woods. And the ghost lights are something that gets reported a lot, especially around that Virginia area of Appalachia, but they happen all over the country, but especially the Appalachian Mountains. And if you don't know about the Appalachian Mountains, they are the oldest mountain range in the world. Like the Appalachian Mountains are so old. It is crazy how old they are. They are ancient. I don't actually know if they're the oldest in the world. I just know they're oldest. So we're out there hunting by ourselves. And I say we are out there because this is by myself, but with a group. So like me and my cousins, we would spread out. Like, you go down that trail, I'll go down this trail, I'll go down this trail. And you're actually really far away from each other. You only got there together, and then you split off into very different directions. So we know we don't go anywhere near where the other one of us are hunting at. Like nowhere near it. And we always communicate very heavily where we're going to be at hunting. So I'm on the very left trail of this. It's everybody's favorite split. We rotate who gets to have this ridge because it is the most successful hunting ridge out there. And further down the trail, and this is how I know it couldn't have been one of them, because further down the trail, somebody would have had to pass me to even get to this point. I haven't even made it to my tree stand yet, and I see a light turn on, and it looked just like somebody turning on a flashlight. But it didn't have like a beam going through the woods. It was almost like if somebody would have the flashlight pointing straight at me, but from 200 yards away. Because out there in total darkness, you can see the smallest, faintest light from forever away. Like, so 200-300 yards away, it looked like somebody had a flashlight directly pointed towards me. So I remember I was a few feet away from my tree stand, and I remember I didn't take my eyes off that spot. Like, even while I'm climbing the tree stand, I'm keeping my eyes on that point, because the light came on just for a few seconds, then went back off. And I never, like, the sun had not came up yet. It was about 30 to 45 minutes from coming up. And I literally did not take my eyes away from that spot because I was so freaked out, and I was so afraid to move and come back down, because I was a good walk away from where we had met up at. Like, I had walked a long ways to get here. So I was essentially by myself, and there's like no cell phone service out here once you're there. It's another reason why we don't move once we're in our tree stands, is because there's not cell phone service to communicate with each other about this. And I know at the end of this ridge, it is sheer cliffs. There's no way to come up from the other side. So I'm thinking, the only thing in my head I'm thinking is there's a trespasser that got out here before I did. So as the sun comes up, I can see that spot. But, there's a lot of brush. There's a lot of trees in the way. This time of year, all the leaves are off of them. And I'm watching that spot. And the sun comes up, And where that light had came from, it would have been physically impossible. And that's what I was afraid of like this whole time. Because where this light came from, it is just cliffs. I mean, just, you would have fallen 100 feet plus on rocks. And if you know anything about ghost lights, they do one of two things. They lead you to a great discovery where you might find somebody that's dead and report it. There's so many true crime cases where people said, oh, I just came across this body because there was a light that guided me there. I saw a light and I wondered who it was and found this dead body, or I found these remains, or I found these belongings. But the other story of ghost lights is if you follow them, they can lead you to great misfortune. And if I would have followed that ghost light, I would have fallen off those cliffs in the dark because I could not see. It was so dark. So if I would have went to investigate, I could have quite literally fallen to my death or fallen and got injured and not be able to call someone for help. I always think about, like to this day, I think about what made that light? Why did it make that light? And what would have happened if I would have followed it? Because if you know about the Fey lights, I'm not even supposed to talk about that in the dark. They can take you to a different dimension through portals. And I'm not going to get into that right now because I've had a very chilling experience on this property with that, and I don't want to discuss it. I wish I wouldn't have even said what I said a second ago. This has been a fun night talking to y'all. I'm going to do one more story, and then I'm going to bounce for the night. I've done a full deep dive like this before of what's happened to me since I've lived in Oklahoma. But the last story for my Tennessee homes is we moved to another new house. So we lived in 4 homes when I lived in Tennessee, when I was a child anyhow, not when I got older. And this home, we got it for a great deal because the previous owner hung himself in the backyard at a storage shed. You've heard me tell this story too. So he had a storage shed out there that set about, I guess the peak of the ceiling would have been about 10 feet off the ground, maybe 9 foot. And it had a little support post that came off the front of it, which I think was to hang deer, to clean and dress deer. Well, he hung himself from it. And when we moved in, we got rid of that storage shed, but you could see the perfect square outline because the foundation of it was still on the ground. So you knew exactly where it was. My dogs, and this is how I know animals can see things we can't see. My dogs used to go to that exact front of that square foundation, exactly where he would have been. They would show their teeth and they would stand their hair up and they would squat down on their hind legs and look up, like, I mean, exactly where he would have been hanging. And it's not like I could tell the dogs about this and they would know to be scared of that spot. And they would just growl and carry on, and they would do this about once every other week. And it would take them about a full minute or two to get over it. I mean, and a minute or two is a long time to see your dog just stand there and go, and just be fighting mad. And these dogs were the calmest dogs in the world. They were golden retrievers. They were super chill, super laid back, and they would just go absolutely nuts at this one spot. I cannot explain how they would have felt that negative energy or that bad energy and that sensation, but they did, and they did it so routinely that I would try to never ever walk with them to that part of the yard. I was in the very back corner of the yard, and I used to never want to take them that way ever when we would go on our walks, because this house was in the middle of a neighborhood in town, and they just always, and we checked that area out. There was no rabbit's nest back there. There was nothing there back there. And they would look at the sky. You know, they weren't looking at the ground, and they would circle the spot. So I knew that they weren't looking at something that was past that. When we first moved into that house, we painted and redid the whole house. And they always say spirits hate it when you change things, especially because it's taking away their memory, I guess, or you're messing with their belongings. And I remember the first night we moved there, we painted in the house, and there was we were all in the kitchen, just exhausted, talking about, moving everything in and painting and all this stuff. And there was just this tremendous bang on the inner wall of the house, like the central wall of the house, because we all agreed it came from right next to us. And it was such a loud bang, it actually shook the table. It was so loud, my mom and my grandmother, who was there helping, actually thought somebody ran into the side of the house with a vehicle. Like, they thought somebody had came up off the road and drove into the house. Like, that is how tremendous of a explosion this was. We searched that whole house over for something that might have fallen over in the move, for a big picture to have fallen off the wall, and nothing was disturbed. Everything looked like it should be, because the house was pretty much empty at this point, because we were really just painting the walls and stuff at this point. There wasn't even that much of our stuff in there besides some beds. Super, super weird. Little tidbit here. My uncle always thought it was me that was haunted. Growing up, My uncle used to always joke that he would never want to babysit me or watch me because he always got creeped out from just a feeling that he would get when I was there. And I never knew what to do there because I heard him say that as a kid and I didn't know what to do with that or it's just a little tidbit to throw in there.
Make sure to like and subscribe for more chilling mysteries. And until next time, stay safe, stay aware, question everything, and please stay out of the shadows.